Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. Lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you. I know that life outside is so hard. There's a lot of things that can tear you apart.
Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Wow, have we got a very interesting subject to discuss tonight, believe me. It's absolutely fascinating. We're going to be talking about the early history of South Africa, amongst other things. Now, before I get onto that, please get a pen and paper ready. Okay, I've got a job for you guys in South Africa to undertake for me. I've been attempting to get one of Julius Malema's spokesmen to accept the challenge of going live on the Loving Life channel. I'm talking about Julius Malema coming live on the Loving Life channel. None are taking my calls. I guess they shit their nappies every time they see a call coming from Australia. I am now going to publish the personal cell phone numbers of Malema's spokesman. There are 3 of them, and I've got all their private cell phone numbers, and I'll be putting those up in a second. And these were provided to me by a pissed off, highly placed EFF insider or member of parliament. So let me just put up those cell phone numbers. Guys, get your pen and paper ready, and please make a note, and please contact them and say that they are being challenged to come, or Julius Malema has been challenged to come live on the Loving Life channel. There you have their phone numbers. Okay, now I will leave this image up for about 60 seconds so that you can record the details and call his henchmen, issuing them with the challenge. I won't publish Juju's personal cell phone number yet. Don't tempt me, Julius. If you feel so inclined, please contact these EFF idiots and extend the invitation to Juju or Julius Malema or his PA to contact me so that we can debate him live on the Loving Life channel. Let us see if this half-brained dwarf has got the balls and mental aptitude to accept my challenge to make up for his blatantly obvious physical inadequacies. All right, I think we've seen enough of that image, but there you go. Please, if you can, contact one of his spokesmen and say, look, the challenge is on. Right, let's continue. Just need to get rid of that. There we are. Now, I'm going to ask my moderators to put my email address, which is homestays@gmail.com, in the side chat, so that when you talk to any of Julius's henchmen, Nazia Paulson, Sinawa Tambo, or Vayani Pambo, you can give them my email address. I note that Police Minister Bekesele, whose personal phone number is, and again, get your pen ready, it's +27, that's for South Africa. If you're in South Africa, just go with a 0 in front of the rest of the number, and the rest of the number is 793020100. So if you're in South Africa, the full number for Bekesele is 07930200100. Now, Bekesele is also missing in action. He's refused. Just give me a second, guys. Hi, Alwyn. Yeah, look, just stay quiet in the background. I'm still getting up to you. Okay, you can listen in the background.
No problem.
Okay, and I can't see you. If you can just get your video on. Sorry, guys, that was just Alwyn contacting me there. So carrying on. Now I see you. That's better. I'm going to ask my moderators to. Oh, I've done that. I note that Becca is still refusing to respond to the challenge to debate me on Loving Life about who is the racist in the room. If you feel so inclined, please prompt Sele yet again to be a man. Now, tonight I'm talking to Alwyn about key moments in South African history and about his organization. And of course, the focus will be on the Boer Nation. Please remember to subscribe to the Loving Life channels to be kept informed, and ask your questions for Alwyn in the side chat. Now, before I get Alwyn on, he's here, I can see him, but before I actually go live with Alwyn, I want to show you a very short piece of a video that I took at the top of Speenkop in 2011. And this is where the British suffered a huge loss. Hundreds of British were killed in one day at the top of this mountain, and you'll see the graves. Let me just play that for you. Here we go.
It is an absolute tragedy. Here is the other mass grave at Speenkop, which now has a fence all the way around it to protect it from the cattle. I don't know what you think, but I think that's a bit tragic. We're just about to leave the spot. Obviously no one ever comes here anymore. As I said just now, it is a Sunday. We have been here for over an hour, and we're the only people who've come here. The signage to Speenkop is not good, and the road is shocking, but still this is such a historic spot. And obviously, even though it's such a major part of South African history, it's forgotten.
Okay. Now, I took that video footage, as I mentioned there, in 2011. Now, let me get Alwyn on. Give me a second, guys. I'm just going to get his there we go. Now, hi, Alwyn. Now we see you.
Hi, good evening, Uncle Scotty. Evening for me. I think it's morning there where you are.
Yeah, it's 4 a.m. in the morning here. Now,
quite early.
we're going to just unpack South African history a bit, because a lot of people misunderstand early South African history and the significance of the Boer republics when we talk about that early part of history. And what I want to do is, because I've researched South African history so much, is I just want to begin and then bring you in when we start getting to the Great Trek in the sort of 1830s with Piet Retief, etc. But before that, okay, we all know that Jan van Riebeeck, and he's with us tonight. Yeah, he's here. Jan van Riebeeck is here. He arrived in Cape Town, what is called Cape Town. It was then the Cape of Good Hope in 1652. And the only people that he came across back then were the Khoi, or the Khoisan, as they call them. There were no Bantu people at all in the Cape. And in fact, the Great Fish River, right up in the Eastern Cape, was on the northern side, was the furthest that the Xhosa had come down to. So basically the whole of the middle of South Africa, the only people who roamed there, and they were nomadic, were the Khoisan, or the Khoi and the San, the Bushmen and the Hottentots, as they were called, but the native name is Khoisan. Now, what happened when the first settlers arrived, or the first residents of the Cape arrived in South Africa in 1652, is that most of them were men, and of course, being young men, they they had hormonal issues, and as a result of that, you have had a new race of or new cultural group of people who were coloured because of the interrelationship between the Khoi and the early settlers in South Africa. And after a number of years, what happened was that the early settlers became very, very sort of, how can I put it? They suddenly had a spell of religious fervor, and they basically cast out this group of colored people, who they called the bastards, because of the manner in which that they had actually arrived on Earth. And the bastards, as they were then known, this is the colored group, or the mixed race group, moved up all the way north of the Orange River into Griquaton. And that was Hardcastle. It was actually the first little settlement north of the Orange River. And from Griquaton in the very early 1820s, they had a fallout after John Campbell had gone to Griquaton and brought in laws, and Adam Cock III, he actually shot off and originally moved to a little settlement near Griquaton, but then he moved into the Orange Free State. And in fact, the first people, apart from the Khoisan, to actually have land and actually have title deeds in the Free State were the Griqua people. This is back in the very early 1820s. And they did so with the blessing of the British colonial government in the Cape. And then, of course, what happened was you had the Great Trek, with people like Piet Retief coming through that area, and they actually displaced the Griqua, no Bantu, from those lands in the Free State. So historically, if you look at the facts, the first real landowners in the Free State in particular were the Griqua people, who now live near Plettenberg Bay in a settlement called Kranshoek. And their leader is Alan Lefleur, lovely man. I've met him many times at Kranshoek. Now, this is where we start getting to the early Boer history, and that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So, take us through, Alwyn, what happened when the Boers started that Great Trek? What actually forced them into that?
Yes, Uncle Scotty, I must first apologize to the viewers if sometimes I search for the English words. English is not my first language, so I'll try my best. And there's some words in Afrikaans that's not easily translatable. There's just no English words for that. So I just want to apologize for that beforehand. What happened is the Cape. You spoke about the Cape. First, Jan van Riebeeck, when he arrived, the Cape was under control of the Verenigde Oos-Indische Compagnie, which was a Dutch company.
Dutch East India Company.
That's it, yes. And, so they started the whole Cape colony.
Yeah.
And from there, as they expanded, you had the Vryburgers, the guys who started farming and they sold their products to the VOC. And yeah, as the numbers increased, the guys obviously expanded further and further. And then we had the first time the English besieged the Cape.
Right.
And then, after that, there was quite some international intervention, and the Cape was given back to the Dutch, which was actually the first time that it was under Dutch government control. And from there, we have the nice saying in Afrikaans, "Die Kaap is weer Hollands," which actually means, everything's good, everything's going great again.
Right.
But then in the early 1700s, that lasted for only a couple of years, I think around about 6 years. And then the English besieged the Cape again, and the Cape colony came under British control. But from there, with the expansion, and you mentioned the Xhosas that was actually on the other side of the Fish River. So the first time the white population came into contact with black people was around about 120 years after settlement in the Cape.
Right.
And then the Xhosas came across the Fish River, and they started raiding the farms, and they stole the cattle, they murdered the farmers. It almost sounds like today's history in South Africa. They murdered the farmers, they stole the cattle. So these farmers had it very bad. But the English didn't quite understand the people, which were mostly from Dutch German descent, and they had some cultural differences with the English, and the English blamed the farmers, and this carried on. There was a couple of border wars, around about 7 border wars. One farmer at one point said that in his lifetime and his father's lifetime, they have been stripped of everything. Everything has been stolen, all their cattle, 7 times.
Yeah.
So these guys had it very hard, and they just got fed up. They said the English government is not looking at them. The English government at one point thought their plan will be, instead of making war with the Xhosas, they will give them gifts, and to try to persuade them not to invade the Boer farms. The Fish River was set as the border.
Yeah.
But once the Xhosas got paid, they obviously saw that this is quite a thing that they can make a great deal of that. And after that, the Khoi and Son saw that the Xhosas were compensated for not invading, so they started invading to try to get compensation. So it was quite a mess. And these guys just got fed up. That was one of the things that they were just fed up, and they said, well, they're going to pack their ox wagons, and they're going to move out of the area, and they're going to move inland. Out of British control. The British had set borders, and they just said that they will move out of the area under British control, and they will look for a country where they will govern over themselves, by people that knows how they feel, by themselves, people from their own folk. As I explained previously, the English language doesn't quite have the meaning to explain what a folk is. The English translation is a people, or a tribe, but that does not quite.
It goes a lot deeper.
That does not quite describe what the Afrikaans word folk means. So I'll probably use that word quite a lot, so just to give the guys background on that.
Right.
Then the Great Trek started, but it did not start all at once. There were different.
There were little groups.
There were different leaders and different tracks. The first guy that actually went out was Potgieter, and later the other guys followed. Retief was, he only joined the trek, quite after that, and then Andres Pretorius only joined about 2 years after the first guys started trekking. So
Right.
these guys trekking groups, and
Well,
later they
I have to tell you, I actually had one of Pete Retief's original title deeds for a property that he has in Grahamstown, or he had in Grahamstown. And that was quite a remarkable document because his signature is on that document. And that was dated, wow, back in I think it was about 1820, somewhere around there.
Yeah, he had, as I understand, Peter Retief had quite a few properties, before he started
Yes.
realizing, before he said, no, well, this is the end of it,
Yeah.
we'll rather trek.
So anyway, they went up through the Free State, and some of them broke off and went into the Transvaal, and others went into what is today KwaZulu-Natal. And we all know what happened when Piet Retief went and saw Dingaan. Tell us about that story. What actually happened there?
Yeah, well, basically, they made contact. The Boers, when they made contact, they went to Port Natal, which is today's Durban.
Yeah.
And they found a settlement there of a couple of English, and most of these English community were living with black women. It was a small community, 20 to 30 guys, and they first spoke to them, and they said they want to have a new republic, and they talked to them, and some of these guys were quite friendly, and they said, no, that sounds like a good idea to them. Even though it was Port Natal, it wasn't really under British control. It was just only a couple of settlers which settled there. And then they had a guy that spoke Zulu, and he was the guide that went to Dingaan. And when Retief
He was a
went to
priest,
Dingaan,
wasn't he?
Sorry?
He was a priest, wasn't he?
No, there was a priest outside Dingaan's kraal, which actually had some of the interventions as well.
Right.
But I can't remember the guy's name now, which was the first contact. So they only made contact with the priest once they went to Dingaan.
Right.
But when they went to Dingaan, they obviously told him what they want, and Dingaan said, but he has a big problem. Some of his cattle was stolen, and he was actually under the impression that the Boers stole his cattle. Because he said that the guys that stole his cattle were guys on horseback, and they had guns with them. And the Boers said, no, they didn't steal the cattle. But, Sikonyela, which was one of the other black tribes chief, he was actually the guy who stole the cattle. And so then Dingaan sent some of these chiefs with the Boers just to confirm that this is right, and they had a treaty drawn up where Dingaan would give them a piece of land that would later become the Republic of Natalia.
Right.
But they need to get his cattle back. So they went to Sikonyela, Retief and his men, and they retrieved the cattle, to make a long story short, and they went back to Dingaan, and with Dingaan's chiefs that went with the Boers could verify that the cattle wasn't at the Boers' cattle, and they did retrieve that from Sikonyela. But Dingaan, there were stories that the priest actually in the, I think he was was an English priest there. He actually heard that Dingaan was planning to kill the Boers, but he didn't warn them because he was afraid. Dingaan was also one of the very vicious leaders. He killed people for not much, like Shaka, his predecessor. And he was afraid that he will be killed. But when they went back, Dingaan didn't receive them at first. And they waited a couple of days before they could see the king, but there wasn't anything strange about that. That was the Zulu custom.
Right.
But part of the Zulu custom was that you can't go into the stad,
Settlement.
The town, the settlement where the Zulu stayed.
Right.
You couldn't go in there with weapons, but it wasn't a rule that only applied to the Boere. It was, even the impis that came from other settlements.
Right.
Because the Zulus had lots of settlements, but Dingaan was obviously in the let's call it the major city of the Zulus. So you were not allowed to have any weapons in there, and Retief and his men went in, once Dingaan said he's going to have a show for them, and he had dancing women, and quite put up a show for the Boers, and then at one time underneath the sand where they danced, they actually had knobkieries which were hidden underneath the sand.
Right.
And then Dingaan, like I say, with the black culture, the guys were very bygelowig, sorry, I'm searching for the English word. They believed in witchcraft and that sort of thing. And they thought that the white men were bewitched because they had thunder sticks, which they called their rifles.
Right.
And then at one time, Dingaan stood up and he said, in Zulu, he said, Bulala Abagati, which actually means kill the wizard. If you translate that correctly. And they murdered the whole party of 68 men of Retief. Retief was the last guy to be murdered.
Yeah.
From there, it gets quite interesting when they went out there. They, just straight after that, Dingaan sent his impis to attack the lagers of the trekkers. And Retief actually warned these guys when they went over the Drakensberg. He said, "Don't divide, stay together."
Yeah.
But the guys, this obviously took time, everything on horseback for Retief to first retrieve the cattle and bring it back. And, so these guys, the grazing wasn't that good. And the guys, they had some friction, so the guys moved further apart to have enough grazing for all of their cattle.
Yeah.
And then Dingaan sent out these impis, and in one night, the impis at Verkenners and Louwkrans and Moordspruit, you can call it murder stream in English, I suppose. The Zulus killed, if memory serves right, I think 168 people, which were, most of them, about 120 or so, were children, and they actually took the children, by the feet, and they crushed their skulls on the ox wagon wheels.
Yeah.
So it was the biggest murder night in the history of our country.
Now, just talking about Dingaan and, of course, Shaka, who came later. There's a place called Shaka's Rock in KwaZulu-Natal, and apparently this is where literally hundreds of thousands of his own people were actually thrown off the top of this rock and died on the rocks below. Do you want to just talk about that? Because I think people need to understand that, when they talk about the violent history of the Zulu people, the kings like Shaka and Dingaan, they murdered millions of their own people, didn't they?
Yeah, if we can get back to Shaka, he was the king of the Zulus before Dingaan, and he was actually the half brother of Dingaan, and Dingaan killed him to become king.
Right.
So and Shaka was one of the most violent kings. He actually in the history you can read about him. Verkenners, he actually murdered a lot of other tribes.
Yeah.
And some of the other tribes that's why the Boers, when they trekked through Free State and Transvaal, most of the areas were empty. There were no people there because Dingaan sent out these MPs to murder these guys.
Well, I'll tell you something very interesting is that I talked about the Griqua people who moved into the Free State, and they found no one there at all. There was no one occupying the area at all. But when the Boers came in, the Boers actually basically gave them an ultimatum to get off the land in the Free State or to go and work for them. And because the Griqua was such a sort of independent people, they actually traveled through Lesotho, what is today Lesotho. It was Lesotho land back then. And they went down into KwaZulu-Natal after getting permission from the British governor. I think his name was George Grey, Sir George Grey, I think it was. And they took the Ongeluk's Pass. Now, if you ever go to Kokstad and you drive up to Matatiele, which is Matatiele means actually the birds have flown. It's a wonderful Zulu word. But if you go to Matatiele, you can actually drive up the Ongeluk's Pass where the Griquas came down, and this was back in the mid to late 1850s. And this whole area was called No Man's Land. And the reason it was called No Man's Land was because of Shaka and Dingaan had come through the area and literally killed everyone. And the Pondos had moved to the coast where Port Shepstone is today. They'd actually got out of that area. And the only people who were left there when the Griquas came into what was then No Man's Land were the San, just a few San and the Drakensberg. And you can actually see their paintings, the rock paintings, if you go to places like Champagne Castle and you take the walk up to, I think it's called the Sphinx. Beautiful walk. And on that walk at the very start, there's actually a little sign that says Bushman painting. You actually go and have a look at one of the Bushman paintings there. Sorry, back to you. So what what we're talking about is really how violent the Zulu culture was back then. It was incredibly violent.
Yeah. If we get back to Shaka, he was actually quite a warrior. He was the guy who actually invented the short spear. Before that, the Zulus had these long spears which they actually threw at the enemies, and he made the spear shorter, where they actually used the spears for hand-to-hand combat. But when Shaka's mother died, he murdered a hell of a lot of his own people, as you said before, on that rock where he said that they weren't. They weren't mourning his mother enough. They weren't as unhappy as he was with his mother's death. So when his mother died, he murdered thousands of his own people. He thought that they weren't mourning his mother enough. So he was one of the very violent kings of South Africa.
There's an amazing video. And for anyone who's watching right now hasn't seen the movie Zulu, you can actually find it on YouTube. It goes for about 90 minutes, and it actually talks about Shaka and his mother, and the whole his mother was like more than a mother to him. It was like his life. He absolutely adored his mother, and it's a fascinating story. As I say, if you just go on YouTube and after this live stream, of course, and just search for Zulu, you will see the documentary. Yeah, back to you.
Yeah. So that's just a background of Dungan and
Now,
well,
tell
Stock
us.
and Dungan, and obviously we talked about the murders of the trackers at Vienen and Hoorspruit.
Yeah,
So after that, the trackers decided that they will need to have in Afrikaans we call it a strafcommando. So in English it's a punishment party or punishment commandment that they will go to punish Dungan for this murders that he has committed. Um, and this took a while in between. The guys, it was the Battle of Italeni, which was a battle that the Zulus won, and because the trackers were divided, they had
yeah,
two leaders, and the leaders didn't work together. And one of the guys, um, Piet Ice, he went into Italeni, into the valley, and Potgieter was supposed to cover the sides, and Potgieter didn't do as they decided beforehand. And in the battle, why I just want to stand still there was one of the children heroes of our folk comes out of this battle. And Piet Ice was wounded. He was the commander of one of the Boer forces which took part in this attack.
right.
And once he was wounded, he told these guys, listen, we are losing the battle, just go, get out, save yourselves. And his son, Dirkie Ice, which was, he was a young man, a child of 10 years old. He actually took his horse and he drove to his father. And he actually tried to defend his father, until the end. He was killed on top of the body of his father.
Wow.
So quite a brave young man, which obviously, is one of the heroes of our folk. But after that, they got, they regrouped. Potgieter actually, the guys blamed him for the Battle of Italeni that went wrong, and with his party, they actually moved into Transvaal, so he didn't take part with the battle that followed at Blood River.
Yeah. That was in 1838, wasn't it?
Yeah. So
16th of December.
Yeah, but
the day of the
before
vow.
that, these guys asked help from the guys in the Cape Colony, and they sent word to Andries Pretorius, and he actually came out. He was quite. They said when he had quite a big stature when he came into the laar. They said he looked like a draaghonder, which is a Dutch soldier. He was quite an imposing figure,
I have to tell you something. I've actually got, and this is, we're doing a bit of a timeline jump here in history, but I've actually got the top part of the British uniform that was used in the Boer War. And I've actually got that here in my house. The original tunic that was used by one of these British soldiers. And what is absolutely amazing, because you said this guy was imposing and big, is that people back then, and we're talking about, 100 years ago, they were much smaller than we are. I mean, this guy was literally like a 14-year-old, and he was one of the grown British soldiers. People don't realize how, we have got bigger and stronger in the last 100 years. I mean, as I say, 100 years ago, we weren't as tall and as strong as we are today. It's quite extraordinary. Anyway, back to you.
Yeah, well, that's all to do with all the vitamins,
the foods,
and the better food that we have now.
Yeah.
Just to stand still before you go on there. I don't know which part of the uniform you have. If it's of the First Anglo-Boer War or the Second Anglo.
Let me get it and I'll show you. Hang on, just keep on talking. I'll be right back.
I must say, I can't see you on this side, to be quite honest.
Okay, I'm back, Alwyn. Look, let me just put this up in front of the camera so people can see it, because this is an original British jacket from the Boer War, and you can see it's got the stripe, these little metal buttons on it, and if you look inside, you can actually see the kind of padding it's got. But this guy is tiny. He's absolutely tiny. But there's the back of it. This is an original British tunic this is actually from the Siege of Ladysmith. Sorry, back to you.
Okay, now, yeah, there's a joke that the Boer people have was with the first Anglo-Boer War, the British wore, red
Yes.
tunics.
Yeah.
So you can't see when they are shot. That's why they wore the red tunic. But when they came back for the second Anglo-Boer War, they wore brown pants.
Yeah, it's camouflage.
Yeah.
It was like target practice in the First World War.
That's it.
Yeah. So let's talk about Blood River. Let's just talk about Blood River.
To get back to Blood River, so obviously when Andre Pretoria, arrived there, he organized a party to go and punish the Zulus. And these guys were trained. He was quite a crafty soldier. He had these guys trained to get the wagons into a laar quite quickly. They build gates that out of wood that fitted underneath the wagons, so the Zulus can't climb through there.
Right.
And these had to be fitted properly. They obviously at that point in time they still used black powder rifles. So they molded their bullets. They molded some bullets which sorry, sometimes I'm lost for the English word, but
that's okay.
They had a little bag with lots of little bullets in them that would work like a modern day shotgun, so they had a lot of shot in it. So they molded this, and then that bags that was in there, they put it into fat, so to lubricate that and to for easily loading. So they were preparing for war. So they went out looking for the Zulus, and when they went out, they obviously tracked towards Umgungundlugu, which was Dingaan's kraal, where he stayed. And then later on they met some of the women and children, Zulus, on their way there, the scouts, there was strict orders from Pretoria not to do anything to the women and the children, and they sent them back with a message to say, tell the Dingaan we're coming. So once the Boers started trekking, they started at Wasbank, that's close to the modern day Ladysmith.
Right.
There on the 9th of December, for the first time, Sarles here led the whole party into a vow, and they said, "No, everyone must repeat this vow, and everyone must be familiar with the vow, and everyone must buy into the vow." And they, as they trekked each night from the 9th, they repeated the vow. they reconfirmed that.
Right.
And then on the night of the 5th, or well, on the day of the 15th, while they trekked, it was a misty, miserable, rainy day, and the Boer guys were actually worried because of the moisture in the air. The black powder sometimes misfired. They didn't want to fire. You would have had all sorts of trouble with the black powder rifles.
Right.
And they trekked and they found the first Zulu impies. They crossed the river, and when they found the first Zulu impies, they said no, they must move back. And they, at the place where they pulled the laar, they had the river on one side and the big donga on the other side.
Right.
I don't know. Do the English guys, the Aussies, know what a donga is?
A dong is like a big hole, well, like where the land falls away.
It's quite a deep. Well, let's call it a big trench, because it's a long thing. It's not just a hole.
Right.
So they had that on the one side and the river on the other side. And what's actually interesting, if you read the history books, even with the guys there, they all had different stories of the shape of the laar. Some say it was round, some say it was in a deep, in a D shape.
Yeah.
And there's even people that say that the wagons were pulled, between the donga and the river, with that creating the side. So it wasn't a circle. But that's just for interest sake. But they had an opening where the cannons were housed, but they moved back, and at night on the 15th, everything was quiet, misty night, and the Boers were starting to sing praise songs. They were praising the Lord. At that point in time, they still had what we call in Afrikaans the psalms of Gesange. So it's church songs. It's not like the beat church songs that we have today. And the Zulus actually said it sounds like people crying in the laar.
Right.
And on the sticks that they had the whips on, with this ox wagons, they had this long stick, so it was quite a long stick. They had that on the wagons with the lamps on top of it, so it looked quite spooky. We previously spoke about how these Zulus believed in witchcraft. Right. And the Zulus had the largest army in Zulu history actually came together for the battle.
It was about 22,000, wasn't it?
Yeah, depending on the history books that you read, some guys, they had approximately 1,000 in a regiment, and they had 30 regiments, 32 regiments. So, they were at about 30,000. But they had, with the shields that they had, it's actually quite an interesting thing. They had the white shields, which were the one, the young guys, the young Zulu warriors, and the black shields were the older guys, the hardened war guys. So they, according to the Zulu way of doing things, they would send in the young, inexperienced guy first, and then when the battle is almost won, they'll send in the hardened soldiers to take the victory. The old men will claim the victory after the young men did the hard work. But because of the mist, the Zulus miscalculated, and they were set up in their regiments quite close to the laar of the Boers.
The lager, yeah.
Yeah. When daybreak actually came, and the 16th came, and it was a lovely sunny day, and when the mist lifted, these guys were actually almost looking each other in the eye.
Wow.
So close, with the front lines of the Zulus. They didn't they miscalculated. They didn't think they will be that close to the lager. And, one of the things one of the miracles of the battle was, the Zulus normally attacked at night. That was their favorite time of attack. But they didn't attack the previous night because, like I said, on this whip sticks where the lamps were and the guys singing, they thought it was too spooky. So they, out of their nature, they did not attack at night.
Right.
And when the mist lifted and these guys were looking each other in the eye, the front regiments were still sitting down. The Zulus was quite an organized army, quite a disciplined army.
Right.
They had this horns which indicated what they needed to do when, and the generals used the horns to give signals. But the first shots, the first Zulus didn't even get up yet when the first shots rang out.
Right.
And with the cannons there, again, history is there's a little bit. Some guys say there's only two cannons, and some say there were 3 cannons in the laar. And one of the cannons, Grieke, can still be seen in the Voortrekker monument. But yeah, in any case, so they used this, let's call it a buckshot first, and they killed a lot of Zulus.
They killed about 5,000, didn't they, on that day?
Yeah, well,
there were only about 450 Boers in this lager.
Yeah, the Boers were actually, what was the number of the Boers? Yeah, around about 450, but they had the guys that actually looked after the cattle, they had to be kept quiet in the laar as well. If they broke out, obviously it would have been a mess. So there were all sorts of miracles on the day. But, when the first shot rang out, the Zulus at the back had to climb over the wounded and the dead to try to get to the laar. And normally when they attack, they would go all out. And they attacked, and the Boers defended like crazy.
Yeah.
Well, the problem with the black powder rifles was when they get too hot, when you reload them, the gunpowder will ignite because of the heat of the barrel.
Right.
And just when later there was a cloud. I do have a black powder rifle, one of my favorite things to play with. And when you shoot that, you'll see there's a huge cloud,
right,
around you. So later on, this cloud was surrounding the laar, and the Boer couldn't really see nicely and what's going on, and the barrels were getting hot, and the Zulus, like I say, against their nature, stopped the attack. And they waited a little bit, and that gave some time for the rifles to
cool down.
Cool down.
Yeah.
And then they had a second attack, and the same happened, and again they retreated. The third time they attacked was actually they saw that they can't attack this whole bunch at a time, so they took their fast soldiers and they let them run one, around the laar they were located, but they let them attack one and not in the whole group. So that meant that the Boers couldn't use the buckshot anymore. No, they had to shoot one Zulu with one bullet.
Right.
And that attack actually had the Boers quite worried for a while because the ammunition were getting scarce, and they couldn't shoot a lot of Zulus. But again, the Zulus stopped the attack. And then the Pretorius actually gave the command of turning the cannon into the old guys that were sitting and waiting.
Ah, right.
And when that shot went off, it actually, one of the miracles again of the day, when it fell down, it fell into the generals of the Zulus.
Wow.
And it killed a lot of the generals and the commanders, and then these old guys thought, no, they're going to attack now. They didn't wait um, for any um,
Command.
felt, you know,
Yeah.
command
But the outcome of the battle was that several thousand Zulus were killed, and that's why the battle was called Blood River, because the blood of the dead just made the river red. Isn't that right?
Yeah, yeah. What actually happened was, that was my next point. You know, so the old guys were attacking from the front, and the front guys had nowhere to go
Yeah.
to, and they were actually bunched up. And in the Donga, you know, they were actually so bunched up that these guys couldn't throw their spears, so the Boers shot a lot of them in the Donga. You know, the Donga was quite deep, so they couldn't just climb through. And the others in the river, you know, some were retreating and some were coming forward. And yeah, they
But the river ran red. The river ran red.
The river ran red that day, and that's why it's called Blood River.
Yeah, and as a result of that particular battle, which is a very, very sacred time in history for the Boers, the Voortrekker monument near Pretoria was built, and that's actually in commemoration of that day, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, the 16th of December is obviously, like I say, the day of the vow. Just to get back to the battle, you know, on the Boer side there were only 3 wounded, no dead.
No, I just want to move on because there's so much to cover here. I mean, it's just huge. Then we had Rorke's Drift, where the British took on the Zulu, and that was quite an extraordinary situation. Now, you mentioned just now about how the Boers split up, and that's why they were weakened. Now, Natalia was one of the provinces owned or governed by the Boers. How many different provinces or regions were there during this period that the Boers actually had?
Yeah, sorry, Uncle Scotty. I just want to get back. I do have a passion for history. So just to give the viewers a little bit of background. When after the Battle of Blood River, when the guys went to the Ganskraal, you know, they actually found Piet Retief and his party. You know, they found their bones where they were murdered, and they found the bag of Piet Retief, where they actually found the treaty that was signed that gave
giving them the land.
That piece of land to the Boers. So, you know, that was done by treaty, and because of that treaty, the Republic of Natalia was declared.
Right.
They had quite a beautiful flag. It's the red, white, and blue flag, but it's in triangles. It's quite a one of the nicest flags.
Right.
But the Boers, they actually went to different places because there were different treks, and there were actually 13 Boer republics.
Wow. Because we only talk about the Transvaal and the Orange Free State, and you're saying that there were 13. Do you remember what their names are?
Some of them, not on the top of my head, all of them, you know, but most of them, or some of them used the same flag, but most of them had their own unique flag, so that was quite nice. You know, then what is Western Transvaal, Northern Cape, we had the Republic of Goosen, you know, they're in the Uppington area.
Right.
Round about Vryburg, that area, we had the Republic of Stellenland. In the northern Natal, we had
was it Vryheid? Yeah. Okay, so what we're saying is that before they formed those 2 Boer republics, they were very scattered. They had like little groups. Now, I just want to move on a little bit because a very prominent person came into the situation. That was Cecil John Rhodes. He actually, when he first came to South Africa, he actually lived in KwaZulu-Natal near the town of Ikopo. And I know this because there's a fellow by the name of Jim Cole who actually had a very big store later on in an area called Riverside, which is just north of or just east of Ikopo. And he had his own money. But the first coinage that ever came out in South Africa was produced in 1874, and it was actually produced by a company called Strachan and Company, which had shops in the Umzimkhulu area. And I'll just show you what those coins look like. These are the original Strachan coins, which date back to 1874. And these were used as money because they didn't have money back then. And you can see there's a 2 shilling, a 1 shilling, a sixpence, and a tikkie there. And you can see from the size. But that was the first currency ever used in South Africa, and it was by a trading store. And then a few years later, we'll get back to we'll get back to Cecil John Rhodes in a second. But in 1892, the Boers brought out their own money. Here it is. This is the Kruger coinage. You can see there's a crown, there's a gold sovereign and a half sovereign, and of course you got the half crown, the florin, etc., etc., and the penny over here, the bronze penny. But they brought out their own money from 1892 right to 1898. Now, I'm going to leave the money side alone in a second. I just wanted to cover the Kruger money as well. Because in 1899, they produced one gold sovereign which has a 99 stamped in it. And that is a unique coin. And that coin today is worth a six-figure sum. If you know, it is an amazing, unique coin from that era. And of course, that happened just before the Second World War, well, during the Second World War, and when, of course, you also had the Veldpond, which was brought out in Pilgrim's Rest. Now, okay, I'm going to leave coinage and money behind now. So let's get back to Cecil Rhodes. So Cecil Rhodes was in KwaZulu-Natal, and he heard about the diamonds being found in the Kimberley area, and he moved to Kimberley. And he wanted to buy up all these little, everybody had like a little stake. And they had a license to go and mine for diamonds in that little block of land. And of course, where the big hole of Kimberley is today is where all the diamonds were found. But you had literally hundreds of different plot owners who were digging their little spot. And if you have a look at the earliest photos of Kimberley, you'll see some were digging faster than others. So you actually had some areas where the ground was, it was like it was like 3 or 4 foot higher than the ground around them, because they were digging faster. And Cecil Rhodes at that time, he actually approached the Rothschilds in the UK and got a check for over £1 million at the time, which with that money he bought out all the other people who had little blocks and set up De Beers, and that's how De Beers started, and that's how Cecil John Rhodes made all his money. Now, in those times, when we talk about the influence of the British, they had taken no interest at all in the Free State or the Transvaal. They had there was nothing there for them. There was no financial gain for them. But as soon as diamonds were found, that's when that Kimberley region was annexed. So the British could actually then get the wealth of that. Now, the same thing happened in, well, let's talk about Majuba first, because, we're now moving into that sort of area. Tell us what happened with the Battle of Majuba and the First Boer War.
Yeah, I think, Uncle Scotty, if we go to Majuba, we must first talk about, what led up to it and go to Paardekraal.
Go ahead.
And Paardekraal obviously featured in the Second Anglo-Boer War as well. so yeah, the you know in April 1877, you know, Sir Shepstone came out of Natal and he drove into Pretoria and he took down the flag of the Boer Republic, the Vierkleur, you know, the four color. If you look there at the back,
Right.
I've got a picture that one there, the back of me. But you know, they took it out and they just hoisted the Union Jack there without any fight. They just took over Pretoria, and you know the Boers tried to sort out this mess where Shepstone just annexed it. You know, it was just him and 25 policemen, and without a battle, without any fighting, you know, they just took control of the republic. So the Boers were unhappy, but they said no, we're not going to have any bloodshed. So they tried to have a peaceful outcome, and that went on for 3 years back and forth. They sent parties, including Paul Kruger, Generaal Joop Bear. I don't remember the secretary's name, but they sent two parties to London and England, you know, to try to sort this out, but the English didn't want to know anything about it. So, in again, December features quite big in our history. On, you know, they decided after they had a lot of meetings across the country, they decided to come together at Parakral, and they actually there had a vow under the brothers, which they say they're going to fight until they gain their freedom of their republic again.
Now Paderkraal is near Krugersdorp, isn't it?
That's it, yeah. That's near the town of Krugersdorp today. The town was later named after President Kruger. But you know, these guys decided that they're going to fight for their freedom, and they took rocks around the kopje there. It's on a little hill, and they stacked. You know, these rocks was 10 feet high, and one of the guys went, Martinus Ras from Pretoria, and he planted the Vierkleur on top of this pile of rocks. So after that, these guys, that was on the 13th of December, and on the 16th of December, which is actually, like we said,
Day of the Vow.
It's like a Sunday in our culture. You know, the Day of the Vow, you know, is quite a historical day. It's a big day. But they went to the printers in Potchefstroom, and actually there the first shots rang out of the first Anglo-Boer War between the English and the Boers. Then they had a couple of fights, you know, in Bronkhorstspruit, Lionsneck, Skynshoogte.
Yeah.
And then the final battle, which took place on the 27th of February 1981, you know, this Parakral was 13 December 1980.
Right.
So, you know, just about 3 months after that, a little bit more, the English went from, well, Mayuba is located, you spoke about names. Mayuba actually in Zulu means mountain of doves.
Right.
So this part is located between the Transvaal and the Natal. Natal was part of the Cape Colony. Transvaal was obviously a Boer Republic. And on the other side, if you stand on top of Mayuba, you can actually see the Free State. You can see 3 provinces there. Quite interesting.
Right.
At night, the English went up the hill. Their commander was Colley. I think he was a colonel, if I'm not mistaken. Can't remember offhand.
Yeah.
And you know, in the earliest days of warfare, whenever you occupied the highest point, the high ground, you know, you were untouchable because you could.
Right.
they didn't have a hell of a lot of long-range weapons and that sort of things. They did have a couple of cannons, which obviously difficult to get up hills, but yeah, if you control the high ground, you were safe. And in the morning, actually, one of the Boer women, she saw that the English is on top of the Mayuba, and she said she went to General Hubert, and they saw the English up the hill, and then the commandant of the South African forces, Nicholas Smith, he was the commandant, and then you had Veldkornet de Roos, and they were the main role players. If you go up Mayuba, it's actually quite a walk. We have a big celebration there each year on the end of February. But you go up there and you get 3 terraces. It's not a straight climb to the top, but when you're on the top, it's a long flat piece. And again, the Boers, went up this hill, and if you look at the hill, you can't believe that the Boers actually, won that battle.
Yeah.
Again, just a higher power that decided that battle, because the English had time to settle in. The Scottish Highlanders on one side, they actually packed their rocks to protect themselves.
Were the British still in their red coats then?
Yeah.
No. There's a very interesting story about this, because the British army at the time said that the Boers did not fight fair because they camouflaged themselves. And the British had these red tunics on, which is like a target. You could see it sticks out like a shag on a rock. You can just say, red, that's a soldier, bang. Whereas the Boers had khaki, which kind of disguised them with the background. And as a result of that particular first Boer War, if I'm not mistaken, the British army got rid of their red tunics and then followed the idea of the Boers and had uniforms which kind of molded into the background.
Yeah, the Boers actually, they in the early part of the Republic, they didn't have an organized army. They only commandeered people living in the country. So these guys didn't have uniform. They went there with their ordinary clothes.
Yeah.
But they had earthy clothes. Browns and that sort of thing. They didn't use bright colors, obviously, because I suppose they've been working on farms. Most of them were farmers. So that was the colors. Yeah, like you say, and not just the red tunics. The English had these yellow helmets. Not yellow helmets, a white helmet. Which made spotting them quite easy. And the way that they were fighting at that point in time, and that's where the Scottish Highlanders actually had a hell of a lot of losses on the one side, because the British way of fighting was, this standing information, making ready to load, stand up, shoot, and everyone will shoot at once, Each time when they came out from behind the rocks, there were fewer red shirts and white helmets,
Your organization, Alwyn, your organization is responsible for maintaining the Paardekraal monument, isn't it?
Not solely, Scotty. We are an organization that looks after the culture of our people, of the folk. But we do have a strong influence at Paardekraal, and we do have a strong influence at Mayuba. But it's folks monuments, so it's part of our culture and part of our people. So there's a couple of different organizations that do their bit there, but we do have a strong hand in maintaining that. And when we do the celebrations each year, it's we started at Mayuba, for instance. We started at a Friday afternoon, and it ends on a Sunday with a church service, just to praise God for the because He gave us the win over the English there, and He gave our republic back. But the guys are camping there each year. The guys are starting earlier and earlier. Although the program only starts on Friday, some of the guys camp out there now from Tuesday and Wednesday already.
Right.
The people get together, and but before
it's
the
a
people
social
get together,
occasion.
it's out on the farm, so this farm must be made ready, and the grass must be cut, and everything must be in shape for the people to celebrate.
I want to move on to back to Cecil Rhodes, because what happened was Cecil Rhodes now owned the Big Hole of Kimberley, or what became the Big Hole of Kimberley, through a company called De Beers. And what a lot of people are not aware of when they talk about South African history is that the Boers and the Afrikaners, all they wanted was their own freedom under their own flag. That's all they wanted. They weren't interested in gold mining. They weren't interested in digging up diamonds. They just had their farms, and they just wanted to live their lives in peace. And of course, the worst possible thing that could have happened when gold was found on the Witwatersrand, because then the British said, whoa, that's worth a lot of money. Now, I'm talking about this because when the ANC and the EFF talk about white monopoly capitalism, what they don't understand is that the Boer folk and the Afrikaners really had no interest in money. They just wanted to be a free nation and do their own thing. And obviously a very, very religious or Christian group of people. And that was their culture. But what you had coming into South Africa at the time when gold was found, you had people like Barney Benato. And he was a Jewish fellow, and he became probably one of the wealthiest men on the Witwatersrand with the gold mines. And there's actually this wonderful story about Barney Benato. He used to have these big dinner parties, and of course he'd invite 100 people or whatever. And one night he was entertaining people, and he was quite a social guy. And they were doing tricks. One of the things they didn't have musicians and stuff like that. They just had like card games or tricks. And Barney Benato saw one of his guests stealing a spoon, a beautiful silver spoon. So Barney Benato called everyone around. He said, okay, guys, I'm going to do an amazing trick for you. And everybody gathered around, and he called this guy out who'd stolen the spoon. And he'd seen him put it in his top pocket of his jacket. And he said, I'm going to show you that I'm a magician. And in front of everybody, he said to this guy, just stand there. And he put his hand in his pocket, and he pulled out the silver spoon. And he said, well, that's magic, isn't it? And this guy never, ever came back to one of those, were never invited to one of those parties again. But, that's how life was back then. But the point I'm really talking about here is that when you've got these political parties talking about white monopoly capitalism, it is nothing to do with the Boers and the Afrikaners. They were never part of that. Today, white monopoly capitalism is basically people like the Ruperts and the Oppenheimers, who are still very big in mining, still very tied up with the Rothschilds. That's where the money is. The rest of the 99% of the white population are battling just as badly today as most of the African population. The only ones who are really making a good bit of money are the black privileged, the ANC politicians and their mates. I mean, they're the only guys who are really making good money today. But let's get back. I just wanted to cover white monopoly capitalism because that is a fact. Most of the white population are not part of that. Over to you.
Yeah, I think one of the things to understand after the wars, just to shed further light on that, after the Second Anglo-Boer War, a lot of the Boers, they had the scorched earth policy, so
Yeah.
Boers didn't have
Yeah.
farms to go back to, and everything was burned down. So a lot of these Boers ended up as mine workers. They came to the city, but that was only after the war. Before the war, there was very few of them that actually worked in the mines. They just went to the mines out of necessity, trying to make a living, because the English, they burned down the farmhouses, they burned all the crops, they killed all the animals, so these guys had nothing to go back to.
Yeah.
In the concentration camps, most of the guys lost the whole families, wives and children.
Yeah, terrible.
About
30,000 women and children died. Now, I just want to show people something. This is actually an original newspaper from Kimberley. It's called the Diamond News. I'll just put that up on the screen. Okay, so this is an original newspaper from 1871. And of course, that is to do with the big hole of Kimberley. And if you have a look, you can see it's all about diamonds and machinery and stuff like that. Fascinating. So that relates to the big hole of Kimberley. Okay, so let's get back to what happened in 1899. Now, gold was found on the Witwatersrand, and we just touched on that. So the British wanted to take control of the Transvaal so that they could then get the revenue from these gold mines that were emerging. Do you want to just take us through that?
Yeah, a little bit before that, you touched on Cecil John Rhodes. He actually had his own country, Rhodesia. It was even named after him, which is today's Zimbabwe. And they had their police force there, and they actually, with all the English interest in the mines, they actually wanted to hasten the fight with the Boer people. And he organized one of his colleagues and friends, Leander Starr Jameson, and he told them to come into
through Krugersdorp, up through Krugersdorp.
They actually went, from Zimbabwe. They went past Krugersdorp. They were stopped. There were a small skirmish, but they were stopped just between the Monday, Krugersdorp and Roodepoort. Actually, that monument, it's part of Soweto now. Soweto has bursted out of its seams, where they were stopped. But he actually had Jameson come in to look for a war, that was in, in 1895, a little bit before the
that was called the Jameson raid, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was the Jameson raid. Yeah, they were stopped.
And it was a complete failure. That was a complete failure.
The communication actually broke down. These what the Boers called the Uitlanders. It's the outlanders, the guys that worked on the mines from the other countries, which were mostly English. They were complaining. They were new guys in the ZR, in the Republic of Transvaal, if you want, and they wanted to have voting rights, but they were scarcely here, and then they were going on about voting rights. It almost sounds like something that happens in Europe today.
Right.
But obviously Transvaal said no, you had to live a certain number of years in Transvaal before you became a Transvaal burger,
right.
Before you can vote, and they tried to squeeze this part, and it was failed. And Paul Kruger, he's quite a statesman. He's my other hero. If we move there, he's there.
Oh yes, I see him. Yeah.
But he actually, these guys could have been hanged for treason.
Yeah.
By the laws of that time. And Paul Kruger actually, the statesman that he was, said he's not going to kill this guy. He's not going to hang them. he's going to hand them over to the British to deal with them. Because they tried to steal the country, and
Yeah.
when they were handed over to the British, they all only had a slap on the wrist. They had to pay fines, and they only spent, I think, 1 or 2 years in jail. So the British looked after their own.
Yeah.
In any other country, they would have been hanged or killed on the spot. But the Boers, I know the media at that time wanted to make out the Boer people as these bad people. Even now in the English language, if someone doesn't behave, they call him Boerish. But that's further from the truth. The Boer people are hard people, and they are strong people. But they're not violent people unless provoked and unless attacked. All of the wars that we fought we were mainly the defenders. We never went out looking for war.
I just wanted to make that point. I mean, you had the first Boer War, you had the Jameson Raid, and then you had the second Boer War. Now, in the first Boer War, the Boers won against the English. The Jameson Raid, they fought back Jameson and they defeated them. Now, after both these major events, the British entered into peace treaties and said, we'll never touch you again, we will never attack you again, didn't they?
Yeah, but we know that, straight after the end of the First Anglo-Boer War, the British started to prepare for the Second War already. And the Boer people saw that war was coming and they were starting to do preparations by their own. The start of the Second War as well, Paul Kruger, the British started to collect on the borders of the Transvaal, and he actually told them, listen, remove your soldiers. We demand that you remove your soldiers. And the British, although the British media swung this to make them look good, but they actually, like I say, they were prepared for war. They were gathering on the border already. They said no, they were gathering on the border because they want to avoid the Boer people from entering, the Cape Colony.
Right.
But they were looking for a fight and they were preparing for a fight. And they actually, after this ultimatum, they forced the Boers into declaring war. The Boers didn't have any other option. So, then the second.
The first thing that happened after the second Boer War was actually announced was that there were 3 major British settlements which bordered on the Boer territories, which were put under siege. And you had Mafeking, you had Kimberley, and you had, of course, Ladysmith, which were all basically cut off. And I've actually got a very old newspaper called the Ladysmith Lyre. I'll just show people that for a second. It's actually the newspaper that was brought out back in 1899 when Ladysmith was under siege. And you can see it's not in great condition, but you can see the adverts from that time. The golden penny, the war as it occurs and stuff like that. But these are fascinating historical relics that I've got, and I've been collecting these for years and years and years. And so when we talk about the Second Boer War, we're talking really, the early part of it was these 3 major settlements that were in siege by the Boers. And I think this is where the Boers got it horribly wrong, because they had these little commandos and they didn't have one commander and one particular army. They were very, very I guess their strength was dissipated because they didn't work together. And in particular, if you look at what happened at Speenkop, which I played that short video right at the very start. That was an extraordinary situation because I think it was Buller who was actually leading the British. And at that time, the British had control of the top of, the Boers had control of Speenkop. And the British climbed up the side of Speenkop, and just like what happened, which you described so eloquently about at the Blood River, there was mist. And the British had never been to the top of Speenkop before, and they had no idea that there were these large hills surrounding it, which made perfect positions for people away from this central Speenkop hill to be targeted, because the top of Speenkop was absolutely flat. It was flat as a pancake. So the British thought, well, look, if we take Speenkop, then we can go and relieve Ladysmith. And they came up the hill during the night. They got to the top of Speenkop. There was mist all over the place. They didn't know, what was happening around them. And the Boers had moved off Speenkop, and they had positioned themselves on the hills surrounding Speenkop. And just like what you described with Blood River, when the mist rose that morning, they looked with horror, because they suddenly realized that here there were several hundred British soldiers exposed on the top of this flat hill with these large hills around them. And as soon as the mist lifted, the Boers just started firing in and just wiping out. Several hundred British were killed on the top of Speenkop in about 12 hours. And of course, it was a very, very hot summer day as well. So, it was not a good place to be. Do you have any comments about what happened to Speenkop?
Yeah, I think you've described it quite well, Uncle Scotty. The numbers is 243 British soldiers that were dead, and 1,250 that was wounded and captured.
Yeah.
So they had quite heavy losses.
And the great irony is, okay, you had this battle on that one day, where the Boers were literally taking target practice because the British were stuck on this flat hill, and there were no rocks. They couldn't create little trenches. The ground was too hard, so they were just target practice. But the irony is that the British the Boers, and this is where, because they didn't have a central command, you had these little groups, even at Speenkop, who really didn't have any association with each other. They were each doing their own thing. And when the British retreated off Speenkop, so did the Boers. And when the British went to go and pick up their dead the next day, they found that the Boers had disappeared. They'd let Speenkop go. I mean, that to me is the hugest irony.
Yeah, like I say, we must remember, if we look back at this, it's actually remarkable that the Boer forces held their own for almost 3 years. The British at that point in time had the biggest army in the world. And, they were fighting, like I said previously, the republics of Transvaal and Free State didn't have any armies on their side.
They were just commandos. They're just little groups.
Yeah, in Transvaal they had the Suid, which was a tiny police force.
Yeah.
And then they had commandments, that were, each district will have his own people coming together and start to fight, but they weren't soldiers. They were mostly farmers. Some guys had started working in other areas. But, there were no trained soldiers, no physical state army that fought against the British army that were all paid soldiers. These guys had to look after their own, they had to go on commando, they had to take their own food, they had to, there were some resources given to them by the government, but that's mainly, some rifles, ammunition, that sort of thing. But mostly these guys had to make do with what they had, So
Yeah.
that makes it even
And
more remarkable if you think about
and,
it.
what's also very interesting is that a lot of the young sons joined their fathers. I mean, some of these guys were only 10 or 12 years old, and there they were fighting a war to help their families. So it was quite extraordinary. Now, I just want to move on to the sieges of Ladysmith and Mafeking in particular, because when we talk about these sieges, there was also Kimberley had to be relieved, and there was that battle. Just I've forgotten the name of the battle, but there was a complete wipeout of the Scottish Highlanders on this flat piece of ground underneath this hill. Well, what was the name of that battle? You remember that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of it now. It's just outside.
I'm sure
Um,
someone in the
but,
side chat will know. What's the name of that battle, guys? The one outside Kimberley that was fought just
just
before.
outside Kimberley, it was the first battle in history where trenches were used.
Yes, and that the Boers put these trenches up, and they went for about 3 kilometers, and they completely massacred the British. Yeah, I'll just wait to see if it'll come up. But let's talk about Mafeking and Ladysmith. Now, Ladysmith was besieged for, I think, about 90 days before the British actually retook it.
118 days.
118 days, yeah. And they actually had a little newspaper, which I've just shown, which came out, and it was all very tongue-in-cheek. And of course, the Boers had that huge gun, which famously hit, well, one of the shells hit the town hall and took out the clock tower at the top. And there's this photograph of this big hole in the actual tower that was taken out by one of the shells of this big gun that the Boers had.
Yeah, I think the siege obviously in the end with the town going so long without food, these guys had to eat their oxen and horses, towards the end of the siege. But not to go too much through the battle. I think one of the funniest moments, if you can call it that, during the war was in 1899 on Christmas Day. The Boers actually fired a shell without a fuse into Ladysmith, and this shell contained a Christmas pudding. And inside the shell, when they had opened up and they with the pudding, they had this Merry Christmas message from the Boers. The Boers obviously the religious people, they didn't like to fight on Sundays and they didn't like to fight on Christmas. So that was the only shell that they fired on Christmas Day, was the one containing the pudding to the English. I think that was quite also only shows the character of the Boer people.
Yeah, and of course there's Wagon Hill that overlooks Ladysmith, and that's where the Boers were entrenched for a long time, trying to take Ladysmith, but they never quite got it right. And there were a couple of guys who got VCs on the British side at Ladysmith. But let's turn our attention to Mafeking, because that is a very interesting story. And we're talking about the absolute ingenuity of Baden-Powell, Lord Baden-Powell, because he was in charge of the British forces there. And the things that he did to try and survive during this extended siege that the British faced. And of course, Baden-Powell was the one who later set up the Boy Scout movement, which is famous around the world. Now, one of the things he did was he actually brought out his own money, because they couldn't get money from the bank. So they literally brought out what they call the Mafeking siege banknotes, and they had all this sort of stuff, which was very innovative. And if you go to Mafeking today, there's a museum there. And this is something that really pisses me off, quite frankly, is the museum now has a black African curator. And when I was there in 2011, there's one room now which is dedicated to the siege of Mafeking. And the actual building, the museum, is called the Siege of Mafeking. But when you walk in today, the main area is now just the African history and who was there and where, you know, it's just these big placards. It looks absolutely crazy. And in the back is this little room where they've got the old siege notes, and you can see bullets that were used during the siege and all this sort of stuff. But back in 2011, the light bulb had gone out in this room. So it was dark. You couldn't see what you're doing. So I'm not joking. They gave you a torch. And you armed with this torch, you went into this dark room, which is really what the whole museum's all about, so that you could shine it on things that are on the walls and stuff like that. It was absolutely crazy. They couldn't replace a light bulb. It was just absolutely crazy.
Yeah, if you look at most of these small towns now, it looks like they have been besieged for a while.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Now,
But
okay.
yeah, actually, Mafeking, it's strange. Oh, yeah, it's good that you touched on it. Mafeking was actually on the border of Transvaal and the Cape, but just to Cape Colony, just to show you that the English were preparing for war. They were digging trenches in September already and making ready in Mafeking, even though war was only declared in October. You know, so that is one of the cases again that shows that, you know, the English were looking for a fight.
Yeah. I'm just seeing if someone's given us the name of that battle. Is it Margaretfontein? Margaretfontein.
It's
Oh, the Battle of
Margaretfontein.
Margaretfontein. There you go. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I just want to say, General Koos de la Rey, he was the first guy that used the trenches, and
Yeah.
that was where he actually got famous, was that Margaretfontein. I'm feeling ashamed that I couldn't remember the name.
Yeah. Now, of course, at that time, one of the people who was involved on the Boer side was Sina van Rensburg, who is now obviously seen as a bit of a prophet by many Afrikaners, and they follow his prophecies very closely. And he was actually one of those people who was very, very badly impacted by the Boer War. Well, of course, all the Boers were. Now, what I just touched on a moment ago is what is happening to the museum at Mafeking, and I've talked about this so much. I mean, the Kuruman mission near Kuruman, where Robert Moffat and David Livingstone hung out way back in the early 1800s, it's now got a black curator. And when I was there again in 2011, things had just disappeared. And you know where they put that plaque on buildings, which means that they're like what's the word for it? It's like a recognized historic building or item or whatever. And the curators of that museum are now actually living in one of those houses, which is they're not supposed to do. It is just quite extraordinary, and sadly, so many of these museums are just being run down, and things have been stolen from them. Have you come across this?
Yeah, if you actually look at the Voortrekker Monument, but there's actually two, not the one in Pretoria, which is the famous one. There's a Voortrekker Monument in a tiny town called Windburg in the Free State.
Right.
And that's also run down and totally, I know it was closed for some time. I haven't been there. I haven't been to the Vrouw Monument, the Women's Monument in Bloemfontein for quite some time. But when you go through these monuments now, the history that they tell you gets distorted.
Yeah.
And they have a Sol Plaatje, a whole section about Sol Plaatje, which actually didn't feature that much in the.
That's in Kimberley, isn't it?
That was part of Sol Plaatje is from there, but we've got a section in the Bloemfontein in the war museum there at the Women's Monument. There's a museum that actually used to tell the story about the war, and it just gets distorted. We went to the Voortrekker Monument. usually when we go there, we obviously go there without a guide. We know the history. You know, we go there. It's almost a spiritual experience for us to be there. But you know, a couple of years back, might have been probably 8 years or so, that we went through there, and we decided to get a guide, the group of us, to take us through the monument. You know, just to get an understanding of what these guides say. You know, all these guides that take you through there is black, and you know, so obviously the story that they tell is the story that they tell the tourists that come to visit South Africa. You know, and she got a fair knowledge of what happened there. Not great, you know. She knows the outlines. And when we asked her, you know, but why did the Battle of Blood River, you know, happen? And you know, she didn't say anything about the murders at Louwkrans and Wenen and Hoorspruit. No, she said no, the war happened because the whites stole the land.
Yeah, that's how they distort the facts.
Yeah, that's a narrative that all the tourists that visit South Africa hear. You know, so they don't hear the correct history and why things happened. You know, the whole narrative throughout and from the politicians as well is just the whites stole the land and that's why the wars happened. You know?
Right. Now, I guess the message that people need to understand is that the Boers were never the aggressors in a war. They were always on the receiving end and always defending themselves. And when you look what happened after the Second Boer War, at the latter part, where they started that scorched earth policy, and they started putting all the women and children into these huge concentration camps. You can't call them anything else, where, as we were saying earlier, something like 20 to 30. In fact, I had a fellow here, I've forgotten what his name is, but he actually is an absolute expert on the concentration camps of the Boer War. And he reckons that up to 35,000 women and children died as a direct result of the British. And then, of course, you had Emily Hobhouse, who came down after the war, saw what was going on, and famously she just exposed the whole thing. And, you know, that they couldn't believe it back in the UK, but what she was actually saying. But you know, without Emily Hobhouse, I think a lot of this would have been brushed under the carpet.
Yeah, you know, and again, you know, just to show the character of the Boer people, you know, Emily Hobhouse is seen as, you know, as a wonderful person, and she still is represented proudly in our history. We talked about the women monument. I've got that on the far end of my wall. I can't show that with a camera, so nicely, but they're next to them.
Oh yes, I see it. Yeah.
You can't see that good, you know, but Emily Hobhouse is honoured there, you know, as part of the women monument. You know, so because of the huge impact she made, and you know, we had a hell of a lot of women and children died. I think it was, with the population at that point in time, if you only take the women and children that died in the concentration camps, it was a third of the Boer population that died. You know, just to give you the impact. Every other nation, you know, if you lose a third of your people, how far will it put you back? You know, so the situation in the concentration camps is horrendous. And now, if I can get back to the Verkenners, and it's not only us, but that's part of what we do. On the 16th of June is a public holiday in South Africa where they have another celebration, the rest of South Africa. But we, the Boer people, we commemorate concentration camp day on the 16th of June. It's not a public holiday because of the concentration camps. You know, they made it a public holiday. They call it Youth Day, but they celebrate Sharpeville. But you know, on the 16th, it's actually the day that Lord Robert signed the what do you call it? not the treaty, but the to get the concentration camps going.
Yeah.
That was on the 16th. So each year we do commemorate that countrywide. A lot of concentration camps at Parakral Monument that we touched on earlier. We have all the about 4 years back, we put up all the names of the people that died in the concentration camp only in Krugersdorp there.
Wow.
And you can find it there. We would have liked to put it up at the concentration camp cemetery, but things in South Africa nowadays, it's unsafe to go to a cemetery.
Right.
The people vandalize the cemeteries. They steal some of the headstones. They topple it. So it's quite horrendous what's going on. So we've decided to put that in the monument where people can actually see it and look at it in a safe environment. If we put it up at the cemetery in Krugersdorp, it will be destroyed within a week, I guess.
I heard that there's somewhere in Gauteng there's this. It's like a wall where people have these little containers where the ashes of their relatives are kept, and I believe that those little containers are actually being broken open and the ashes being taken of people who've passed away. The ashes have been stolen and then been used in some kind of a drug or something like that. Have you heard that?
Yeah, no, that's definitely going on. I think they call the drug in Norway where they have a mix of dacha and what is this crystal things? I'm not
Crystal meth.
Yeah. So they have this mix, and sometimes it even contains rat poison and all sorts of funny stuff. Obviously, part of the witchcraft, I suppose that's why it's got to do with the ashes. But yeah, most of the cemeteries in South Africa is quite a state. So what happens with these let's call them walls of remembrance, lots of churches is setting that up within their premises now. Like I say, it's just totally unsafe.
Right.
If you go out to a cemetery, a woman can't visit the cemetery alone.
Yeah.
And even if you go with your wife to visit the cemetery, it's even unsafe. You need to be armed.
It's crazy.
It's a hangout for all the rubbish in the country, and it's in most cities where this takes place in the cemeteries. It's not isolated cases. It's almost everywhere.
Right. Now, let's go back to the Boer War. Okay, Paul Kruger knows that he's going to lose. The British are sort of closing in, and he shoots off towards Mozambique, gets a train to what was it called? Lorenzo Marx. Lorenzo Marx, it was called at the time. And we're talking about the missing millions, all this gold that apparently he had with him. And there's a very interesting character. I love this guy to bits. His name's Michael Tellinger. And he's got some conspiracy theories that will, you can't make the shit up that he comes up with. I mean, but he's a lovely guy. And he's got this strategy called the one safe town or something like that, which he's working with municipalities on, and it seems to be going. But Michael has got a theory that Kruger's gold is, and he's actually identified where he thinks it is. He's not telling anybody, but he says there are these huge caves, and and when he's ready, he's going to go down there with a torch and go and see if he can find Kruger's millions. And that's, of course, in Mpumalanga, which is sort of, that particular area. What are your thoughts about what happened to Kruger's gold? Or Kruger's millions?
Before we touch on the gold, I just want to say, I'm obviously, you'll see my beard, and as I'm, in a organization that actually promotes culture, on the 10th of October, this past Saturday, was actually the commemoration of Paul Kruger's birthday. So each year we have a little Kruger festival here in Krugersdorp, and then yeah, that's why I shaved my beard like on Paul. Yeah. Yeah, so I've read many a book about him, but we must just understand. A lot of people say that actually he wasn't a good president. You know, they when the war was on, they actually he went for safety to Europe, but that's not the case. You know, he was an old man at that time, and the Volksraad, which is actually the government of the Republic, you know, they said they will organize for Paul to go to Europe because they didn't want him to fall into British hands, because then Britain will claim this massive victory if they could catch the president.
Right.
So it was against the president's wishes to go. You know, he wanted to stay, but the Volksraad said no. You know, for the sake of the Republic, you need to go, and that's why Paul Kruger went. You know, yeah, just to get that fact straight. Yeah, the Kruger millions, on Scotty, people have been looking for that for ages. I think if they did exist, you know, they wouldn't, or that it would have been found a long time ago. One of the conspiracy theories is if you look at the Paarl monument, on top it's got a little cap, but on this cap it's actually got a lightning protector with a wire running down. You know, so we all previously had the conspiracy theory that you know, if you remove that cap, the millions is buried inside the monument. But I'm gonna tell the guys, if it was there, I would have driven a Ferrari already. So don't break down the monument. It's not there. Yeah, no, but that was part of the war, the wartime. The ZAR, the Zuid-Afrikaanse Republiek, which when Paul was president of, wasn't that wealthy at the time.
Right.
So gold was just, you know, was quite a new thing, and the government did make some money off of that, but not a hell of a lot. They saw, after the Jameson raid, you know, they saw that war was coming. So they bought
a lot of Mausers.
A lot of what they call pom-poms from
Germany.
From Germany. And they bought Mausers from Germany, and they had ammunition came in. So they prepared for the war as well. It was a country that wasn't that wealthy, you know. Most of the gold, what the people perceived to be all those millions, you know, was actually paid over for weaponry to fight the war.
Yeah.
You know, so by the end of the war, you know, the Republic had no money left, but it was just part of the war effort. You know, for a new country, you know, they only gained their freedom with the Saint-Tropez Convention in 1852, and they were still finding their feet. And you know, within a span of 50 years, and not even 50 years, they had to fight two wars against the British. And you know, within that time span, they had wars with some of the black tribes as well. You know, so I think the millions, the guys are going to look very long into the future, but I don't think there's anything left. You know, this was all paid for the war effort.
Yeah. Well, I just have to pick up on what you were saying there with the Germans, but what is really not discussed much is the influence of the Germans in South Africa. There were parts of South Africa that had a huge German population, like, for example, south of Durban, near Port Shepstone. In fact, that area, the British were concerned that it would become a little German colony down there on the wild coast. And you've got these towns like Hermannsburg, and you've got the Hermannsburg Mission, and you know, if you look at near Pinetown, there's that mission. I just can't think of the name right now. It's up on top of the hill as you go towards Pietermaritzburg, and it's a huge and old mission. What's that called, the Hermannsburg Mission? I can't remember. I'm sure someone in the side chat will remind me what its name is. I feel embarrassed. But there was one particular missionary there who was an amazing man, the innovative things he did. But getting back to the German influence in South Africa, it was huge. You take German Southwest Africa, for example. I mean, that was actually a German colony.
Yeah, we still, as of today, we have in lots of towns we have the German Schule. I don't know if I pronounce it correctly, but the German schools. Where the children get taught in German.
Right.
But with the founding nations, the Boer people is actually a mixture of a couple of people. We have the guys that came to the Cape were obviously the Dutch, with the East India Company, and then you had a huge lot of Germans coming in. You had French coming in, the French Huguenots. We even had a large English population that came to settle in the Cape. That was even before the Cape were annexed. So what's actually interesting within the Boer Wars, there was a lot of English people fighting on the Boer side, and not on the English side, and that actually divided the country a little bit. But the guys got some stayed more or less German. Paul Kruger, his surname is German, but they married Dutch ladies and French ladies, so this all got intermingled. But sometimes you got certain colonies that still stayed, mostly, of the founding nations. But you're talking about Southwest Africa, which is called Namibia now, and that was after the second Boer War. And at the start of the First World War, we actually had you could almost call it a burgeroorlog, a war,
the Civil War.
Civil War. Yeah, thanks, Uncle Scotty. I told you in the beginning my English will sometimes
That's okay.
Because the Jan Smuts, which was he was actually a general on the Boer side again, in the Second Anglo-Boer War. But after we became a union, the Union of South Africa after the war, these guys became full-time politicians, and they adopted the Westminster system of politics from England, and that's how political party started in South Africa. Before that, in our culture, we never had a thing like a political party.
Right.
So it was something quite new to us. And with Jan Smuts becoming head of the union at that point in time, he actually, from a Boer general, he became one of the most, biggest queen footlickers, and I suppose I can't say arse wipers, but there I said it. Of the English, he actually betrayed his own people.
Yeah.
And in 1914, before the start of the First World War, he actually wanted, without provocation, the Southwest Africa was like you said, a German colony.
Yeah.
But the Boers and the Germans lived in peace next to each other, good neighbors. They helped each other. And Jan Smit said, no, we must attack Southwest Africa for the crown and for the queen. And obviously that didn't sit right. You must understand that it's barely 12 years after the concentration camps ended and the war against the English ended. So now a lot of the Boer population wasn't too happy to fight on the English side.
Yeah, they wanted to join the Germans.
Yeah, and we had a rebellion then, and a lot of the old generals, that was just before the start of this rebellion, that's where General Koos de la Rey, one of the most popular generals in South Africa in history,
yeah.
Where he was shot, there was a foster gang, and but I don't want to go into that. I'm going to talk too long
And
about that. We go into that.
interestingly,
But
Sina van Rensburg predicted that he was going to get shot.
that is one of Singer's biggest visions that he sees. Like he said, when Koos, as he called him, without a hat, and that means that he will die.
I just
always wore his hat.
Yeah, I just need to say that thanks, Louise. That mission station I was talking about in Pinetown is called the Marion Hill Mission Station. And if you live in Pinetown, do yourself a favor and go and visit it. It's up that big hill, as I say, just outside Pinetown. It is an amazing place. And wow, the history behind that place is extraordinary. I've also got a message here from Ray Fester who says, I grew up in the Elands River Valley near Paul Kruger's farm. It is near Waterval Onder in the Elandsrivier Valley. His farm is on the railway line to Maputo, which is why he escaped that way, I guess, by train.
He was actually, he went to train to Waterval Hoven, Waterval Onder. They actually set up the government offices in the train when Pretoria was taken.
Yes, well, at Paul Kruger's house in Pretoria, you can actually see that wagon.
Yeah, and he actually had a farm out Rustenburg's way as well, where it was actually his farm. I don't know, I must say, I didn't know about his farm in Waterval Hoven, there along the Elandsrivier. I didn't know that there was a farm that belonged to him, to be quite honest. I know about his farm out Rustenburg's way.
Right.
Verkenners, I think the farm's name was.
Now, Greg Adams says, please ask Alwyn if Jan Smuts was considered as a temporary Prime Minister of Britain as Churchill was dealing with the Nazis.
Well, I won't know what's going on in Britain. I just, I just want to say for a great part, I don't know if you heard my donkey a while ago.
No.
But yeah, I named him Jan Smuts. Jan Smuts is not a...
Well, I tell you what, our Jan Smuts here in the side chat's not going to be happy with that.
Jan Smuts is not a very beloved character in our history. Just because of...
Oh, sorry, not Jan Smuts. I've got that wrong. I was talking about Jan van Riebeck. Sorry, I've just had a senior's moment there.
No, Jan Smuts, obviously.
So you call your donkey Jan Smuts?
I actually had two donkeys. One I did away with now, but the other one was Louis Botha. They both were great generals in the Anglo-Boer War, but after the war, they really became English supporters, even against the other people. We had a rebellion on the mines with the white mine workers. Like I said earlier, a lot of the white guys had to go to the mines after the war just because they had nowhere to go to and try to earn a living. And just because of the poor way the workers were treated, these guys had a little rebellion, and Jan Smuts actually had a lot of them. I think it was 1921, 1922. Had a lot of the white mine workers shot. We talked about the rebellion. One of the guys, he's also a martyr and one of the great Boer guys. During the rebellion, he was caught. The 1914 rebellion, when these guys didn't want to take Southwest Africa.
Right.
UP4E, and he was actually sentenced to die in front of a firing squad. And the guys tried to get Jan Smuts to just say, please don't go ahead with it. And some of his former colleagues that fought with him in the Second Anglo-Boer War, they were all trying to save UP's life. And Jan Smuts was nowhere to be found, until after the execution. Then he crawled out of his hole. So that didn't make him very lovable. under the Boer people. Joppie, one of his last words was, "Don't shoot me in my face, shoot me through my heart. I've got a big Boer heart to aim at."
Yeah.
If I can
Just
translate that.
just on Jan Smuts, there's a very interesting but totally factual story. You might recall Baron von Lettow-Vorbeck, who was the leader of the German forces in East Africa, what was then German East Africa, which became Tanganyika and now Tanzania. But Jan Smuts chased this guy all around Africa during the First World War. Never caught him. He had the only division of soldiers, von Lettow-Vorbeck, that was never actually having to surrender. He never surrendered. He just put his weapons down. He said, "Okay, the war's over. We're not going to fight anymore." But he never actually officially surrendered. And Jan Smuts had so much respect for this guy that after the Second World War, I think it was after the Second World War, when a lot of the German nation were living in a huge amount of poverty. And I actually had a card that was signed by von Lettow-Vorbeck where he's thanking an American family for sending them a food parcel. And he said, "Thank you so much because we are starving." And Jan Smuts heard about this, and he actually put Baron von Lettow-Vorbeck onto a British pension, a war pension, even though he was actually the commander of the other side during the World War I. And that's the sort of respect that Jan Smuts had for this guy. It's a fascinating story. There's a book called something on Tutu, which actually talks about that. It talks about Lake Tanganyika and these big boats that were on there, and how they actually tried to take out these boats which were German on the lake. That was on Lake Tanganyika. Yeah, it's a fascinating story, fascinating part of history. Now, look, let's get back to your organization. We've really just been talking about history and little anecdotes. Tell us about the Verkenners Beweging van Suid-Afrika.
Yeah, I see on your link you said the Verkenningsbeweging. It's actually the Verkennersbeweging.
Someone told me I'd spelt it wrong, so I changed it. I'll fix that. It's
No, it's good. Now, don't feel bad about my English. If you can't do that good, so we could call it quits.
Yeah, call it quits. That's good. Works for me.
No, Uncle Scotty, we're a movement. Like I said, we're a culture organization, and we're a movement that's based on Christian values and false values. Like I said before, I don't think there's a good enough English word to describe false.
Right.
And within our organization, we give recognition to God as the only one that we need to obey. And we see the Bible as the infallible Word of God. And we try to use this as our norms and as our guidelines throughout life, actually. We try to preserve and expand our language, Afrikaans. Nowadays it's coming under more and more pressure in schools. If you look at the number of Afrikaans schools that were there in 1994, and how much of them is English schools now. First
right.
The government tried to make them double medium, and most of these schools are not double medium longer than 2 years before they only become English medium. Like I say, that's one of the reasons why we do support in most of the towns where we do have members and where we do have CFU schools, the Christian folks-owned schools. We do support them tremendously and try to keep them afloat, because
right.
That's the only places where our values and our history are taught. As it actually happened. Most of the schools now, with this, most of the people hailed South Africa as the most progressive grondwet
law.
But what do you call it? Yeah, that's not
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Constitution. Sorry.
Oh, Constitution. I got you. Yeah. Okay. Now,
I'll
now
get around to it eventually.
I just
You
want to
know,
let you know that I've corrected the spelling. Just so it's now
okay,
says Verkenners Beweging, and you've got a Facebook page with that name, haven't you? So people can actually find out more about your organisation through the Facebook page, and you've also got a Boer Media YouTube channel, which has got some really interesting stuff in it. And yeah, do you want to just tell us about your Boer Media YouTube channel?
Yeah, sure. It's not mine. I won't claim it as mine. I'm part of a group of people, and we all do our bit. We actually got one guy that do most of the work. I must give a shout out to Koert van der Reis. You know, he's the silent guy in the background and not the face that you actually always see. But he's the guy that keeps the rest of us in line and you know, do most of the work where you don't see him. So he's the guy that actually keeps this going. So the idea behind Boer Media was just you know, the media organizations nowadays, you know, they just they say, you know, when they say anything about the Boer people, they normally put it in a bad light.
Yeah.
And we don't have a voice, you know, and we're always the villain. And you know, because most of these channels are either state-owned or they try to be so politically correct that no, they don't always tell. No, I don't want to say they don't always. They rarely tell the truth.
Yeah.
You know, so we strive to give our people's side of the story.
Right, of the history. Now, I have to tell you, just talking.
Not only history, you know, current things that happens. You know, just to get the word out. And yeah, we do good, and we've got strong people that's part of the team.
Okay, now just talking about current things, we had that protest in Senegal just on Friday, and I was absolutely appalled by the way SATV in particular presented the situation. They completely ignored the fact that the EFF weren't invited. They went there to cause trouble, and not only that, but they went so far as to suggest that it was the farmers' fault that this near conflict happened in Senegal. What are your thoughts about how the media report on the situation in South Africa? I'm talking about the mainstream media like News 24 and stuff like that.
No, that's why I'd say, Uncle Scotty, they want to make out our Boer people as the villains. If you, you know, Boer media had a lot of guys on the ground there in different places around the town, you know, and most of the places where the Boer people actually came together and prayed and, you know, devoted the day and thought about the family and the murdered young man, which is quite sad. You know, they didn't cover that because there's no sensation in it.
Yeah.
You know, but when the guys walked around early in the morning already, and they spoke to the EFF guys, you know, one guy while he was being filmed, you know, he was smoking nyope, which is this drug, which is, you know, dacha and meth and all sorts of strange things. And you could see in his eyes, he's not quite there. And with a lot of the EFF supporters, when they walked through them early in the morning, they were already drunk. You know, they were bussed in from as far as Kwakwa and Alexandra, just to give the people an idea. You know, they've been bussed in for. You know, Kwakwa is still further, so that's probably 650 kilometers. And when they talk to these people, had interviews with them, you know, these guys didn't even know why they were there. You know, you ask them why. Yeah, they say no, we protest. So why are you we are supporting. So what are you supporting? No, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
We protest. What are you protesting? No, I don't know. I think it's the racist white people, you know. And then they
Yeah,
go
there was that famous statement by one of the EFF women who said, "Oh, you know, I'm here because of racism." And the
yeah.
guy talking to her said, "Well, what is racism?" She said, "I don't know." It just that kind of sums it up, doesn't it?
Yeah, and the problem is, you know, the Julius Malema in the beginning, he actually said the narrative from his side was that they are going to protect the government buildings against the Boer people, you know, and our people have always protested, um, you know, within limits, and we've kept it, you know, civil. Last week in Senegal, there was a tiny outburst, but not half. You know, if if you live in South Africa, you see that sort of thing on at least 4 places at the same time in any given day in any town in South Africa, across South Africa. But you know, because it was noteworthy, it was the first time that the white people actually, you know, said, "Listen, this is not acceptable," and you know what happened there. You know what happened there in Senegal the first time wasn't even half as bad as, like I say, what happens on a daily basis in
Yeah.
South Africa. But because the black people does it on a daily basis, you know, it's not news anymore. It's not newsworthy, you know, because it's a daily occurrence. But as soon as white people does it, it goes throughout the world to make out the white people as the villains, and that's definitely not the case. You'll see, like I say, Malema said they're going to protect the port building. After they left there, the dustbins were overturned in the town.
Yeah.
You know, where the EFF was, it was a total mess. They didn't protect anything. They just, you know, broke everything in their path, as is what is their nature on most EFF rallies. You know, so it was a total lie. It was, they were there just to you know, to pick a fight with the Boer people that went there to show their disgust with a court case with the guy's bail application that murdered this young man.
Yeah.
You know, so they were out there inciting violence.
Yeah.
So
Well,
the Boer people that went there, violence was the furthest thing from their mind. But like I said previously, the Boer people are strong people, and you know, but we are hard people, and you know, we don't look for a fight. Throughout our history, we never picked fights. But if a fight is on our doorstep, we don't step back.
yeah. Now, the fake news, as I call them, clearly they have their own narrative. And it's interesting we're talking about the EFF now, because before, when you first came on, I put out a challenge to Julius Malema to come onto a live stream with me. And I put up the phone numbers for his 3 spokesmen, which were given to me by someone very high up in the EFF, whose confidentiality is guaranteed. And he said, "Look, I've got Julius Malema's cell phone number as well, but I haven't put that up yet. But I've tried to contact these guys, and as soon as they see it's a call coming from Australia, they just put the phone down. They don't want to talk to me. But I just want to say again openly, the challenge is for Malema to come on a live stream with me, and let's have a bit of a debate about racism in South Africa." Okay, back to you.
Yeah, I want to call him out. You know, I want to call him out as a coward.
Yeah.
You know, on your channel here. You know, when he arrived in Senegal, he didn't arrive with his impies with a bus. He's been brought along with his security guards out the back, and they secured his safety. A lot of years back, when he started shouting from stages and shouted, "Kill the Boer," the previous president of our organization actually challenged Malema, and he said, "Listen, I'll be at the Voortrekker Monument on this day, this time. If you want to shoot a Boer, come and shoot me."
Right.
you are big mouth in front of your supporters. Like I say, he still was in the ANC Youth League. That was before he started his own party. And like the cowardies, he never showed up.
Yeah.
And not him or one of his youth league bunch of cowards are right. So he's a coward. He can shout from stages, and he can shout in front of the media cameras, but if he's confronted one-on-one with real men, and he'll only have a big and a loud mouth when he's surrounded by security people.
Yeah.
If you get him one-on-one, he's a shriveling coward. I can't even speak up. When I get across, I just want to speak Afrikaans, so I'll stop there.
I just have to say that if you gave Julius Malema an enema, you would fit him in a shoebox. He's so full of shit. Now, what disturbed me on Friday was that he was seen or photographed sitting down next to Becky Cele, the Minister of Police, in that courthouse on Friday, where these two guys were having their case heard. And that to me is very disturbing, because what happened is Anthony James, who's a social commentator on YouTube, he's actually now being charged with crimen injuria, because he gave a speech at Senegal where he called Julius Malema an enemy of the state. I would go much further than that. I would say that Julius Malema is just an out-and-out little man with a big racist point of view, and he should really get a re-education. That's what he should get, and he should get that from behind bars where he belongs. So just the concern I had is seeing that photo or photos of him sitting next to Becky Cele, because you wonder what they're talking about.
Yeah, Uncle Scotty, it was quite in the country. Obviously, the last week, the story on everyone's lips was Senegal, and Becky Cele went to speak to the farmers there, and out of the farming community, there was a young farmer. I don't want to mention his name. Well, I don't even recall his name. I don't think it's worth recalling his name. Which said, and in his message, he asked the people to stay away from Senegal and please don't come to Senegal. We must give Becky Cele time to work this out. Becky Cele has promised them in 3 weeks they'll have answers. They didn't provide answers in 26 years.
Yeah.
They don't protect our people on our farms. We used to have the commando system where the people organized themselves, which fell under the previous army, and they took that away, and they promised us that the farming communities will be saved by a system which works through the police, like as a reservist type of system. And that promise haven't came together in 26 years. And now the guys want to believe him for another 3 years. And like you say, just before he went into the court, he was openly inciting violence.
Yeah.
And and telling these people how bad the white people were. They were outside the court singing "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer," and then he goes and sits next to the Minister of Police, which actually should arrest the bastard for singing "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer."
Yeah, exactly.
That's, but when a farmer storms into a courtroom and pushes a policeman out of the way, he doesn't get bail for quite some time. But a guy standing on a platform singing in the middle of the road for the whole bloody world to see, and the Minister of Police sitting and chatting to him like they're old buddies.
Yeah.
That only shows to me like obviously the minister must condone what he's saying. I don't think the minister is feeling much for the farmers in South Africa. I don't know how some of the people can still believe that the minister is feeling anything for them and believe that anything will change in 3 weeks. At the rate it's going in the country, in 3 weeks we'll only have more people standing next to open graves, and we'll have more people needing to go to court rooms to protest the murderers for getting bail.
Right.
This minister police, he even said it. One of the guys that murdered this young guy has been arrested 16 times before.
Yeah, and he's still up on
Yeah,
bail.
how in any other civilized country will that be the case?
Well, I would have been as surprised as if General Isaac van Zyl had sat down next to Bekele. When you think of Julius Malema sitting down next to Bekele, it just, there was something there that didn't fit, didn't work. I mean, it's just wrong. Now, I just want to respond to a comment by Viking Boer. He says, do you have these coins on your website? I worked in the bank for 14 years and collected also coins. I have 300 pennies, which you can have. Seriously. Well, I love old coins, so yeah, that'd be great. But I do have a website. It's called tokencoins.com, in case you want to go and check it out. And I haven't touched their website for years, so it's a very old, very, very old website. All right, now I'm going to start wrapping up our discussion very shortly, Alwyn. I just want to thank you so much for coming on tonight and having a chat with me about really putting facts right about the early South African history and how badly it's been misrepresented by, as you say, tourist operators and tour guides and in history books and stuff like that. Is there something you would like to say to everybody watching the video at the moment? We've got about 200 people watching right now. Or something you could say that people watching the video later, just a message for them.
Yeah, just two things that I want to touch on. These guys that wonder why I say Uncle Scotty, the South African guys will understand. In the Afrikaans language, we call the elders oom, which is uncle in English. So, that's just a sign of respect. I know the English language doesn't allow that they call the person on his name. Our culture is a little bit different, and that's why I say Uncle Scotty, just to explain that to the guys. What I want to say is, please, when you're not in South Africa, and even if you're in South Africa, pray for my people, pray for my folk, pray for the Boer in South Africa. We are under big pressure. We're a minority in an Africa country, which I can promise you is not the easiest thing to do. If you see in America where the white people are in the majority and the problems that you have in your big cities with Black Lives Matter, just think if your population makes out, I don't know what the last census is, I think we're around about 6% of the population. So we're vastly outnumbered, and our people are getting murdered, not only on farms, in towns, in suburbs. I see our president again said, and Julius said, there's no such thing as farm murders, and the president, in his last newsletter the last week, said, it's not only white people, and the people that mostly gets murdered is black young people. But I just want to turn it around a little bit. Obviously, black young people the numbers will be more because they outnumber us, 12 to 1. But the answer is who is the guys behind the murders? Who are the murderers? And the murderers are the black people, the majority of it. There's a tiny little bit of these murders that actually gets committed by white people. If white people commit only a tenth of the murders against black people than what is committed black against white, it will be world news every day, each day.
Yeah.
But it's like we are the forgotten people, the forgotten white tribe of Africa, and nobody gives a damn about us. And I know the world's not going to fall over their feet to come and help us, but think of us in your prayers. We're a religious people, and keep us in your prayers and pray for us, and just understand, even if you just get the word out, so the word can get out. We don't expect anyone from any country in the world to come and get us out of our own mess. But a little understanding will go a long way. But we will have to get out of this mess ourselves, but at least when you hear the lies from the mainstream media, just understand that it is lies and just know the truth.
Right. Now, I've got a couple of things I just need to add to that. The first thing is that, yeah, most of my subscribers in South Africa who are young call me Oom. So, you know, that I know all about that. But I have to tell you that I have quite a few African subscribers too, and I think they follow me just to see what I'm up to. And they call me Old Fart. So they have a rather different way of presenting me. And yeah, the final thing I'd like to say is that don't forget, everybody watching, that the Sunday service will be going up in a couple of hours' time by Dan Berryman, and it's a very, very relevant subject that he's going to be talking about. And it's basically talking about how through adversity we are drawn to God. I haven't got the words exactly right, but it's along that theme. And it's a very, very powerful service that he gives. So please watch that on Sunday. All right, now let's see what Groen Rizzle says. Can you try get a live stream with Aiden Abolnik? Well, if you can tell us a bit about the guy. The SSA. Okay, Marlena, can you have a look into that for us, that particular one? Just have you look at some of the other messages that are coming through. Okay, that seems to be about the only question at this stage. All right, so I just want to thank you, Alwyn, for joining us tonight. And just to reiterate, you have a Facebook page, and the name of that Facebook page is Verkenners Beweging, which I've now spelt right and underneath this video in the title. So to go and see Alwyn's Facebook page, just search on that. And of course, they've also got a YouTube page, which they put YouTube videos up, and that's called Boer Media. So just search on that in YouTube. Is there any other place people can find you?
Yeah, Boer Media is both on Facebook and on YouTube. So Boer Media is on both platforms.
Okay, now how do people join your organization, Die Verkenners Beweging?
Well, they can just leave us a message there, and we'll get back to them, and you know, we'll get the guy, you know, depending on where they stay, closest to them to get into contact with him. Yeah, depending on where the people live. Well, otherwise they could give me a shout. Yeah, if you look on Boer Media, they can find my phone number there.
Right.
You know, so yeah.
How many members have you got?
Uncle Scotty, not a hell of a lot, because to be quite honest, because we ask people to work.
Yeah.
You know, we work behind the scenes, and you don't get glory for your work. We don't take photographs while we work. No, we've got around the country, I think about 300 members. I don't have the
That's quite a good number.
So not millions.
That's it, but that's a good number. All right.
Yeah. No, 300 good men. You know,
Yeah.
Gideon. You know, he survived, and well, he actually saved his people with only 300 men. So it's a good number.
No, that's great. All right, guys. Look, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I hope you enjoyed it wasn't really a history lesson, it was just discussion, clarifying a few historical inaccuracies, and in particular about the way the Boers, I think that the real message is that the Boers have never been the aggressors. They've always been on the receiving end of a battle. And that's something that history does not present when you look at South African history. So I'm pleased we sorted that out. Thank you so much to the moderators for the great work that you guys always do. Yeah, I'll just sign off now. But Alwyn, once again, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that you get some feedback from people on your Facebook page.
Thanks for inviting me, Uncle Scotty. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. All right, guys, take care, and we'll see you soon again in a live stream. Please have a safe evening, and